Good morning. My name is Dr. Melanie Matthew. I have a PhD in the field of immunology, and someone brought a paper to me that made them concerned about getting the new COVID updated vaccine, whether or not it was going to be efficacious. And I am going to go over all of our booster data and efficacy of showing your immune system the virus again, the spike protein again, and what that does, and how it improves your chances of survival and reduces your chances of getting long SARS-CoV-2, and reduces your chances of being hospitalized. So these are all good things. But someone brought this paper to me in particular, and we're asking some questions. So this paper is effectiveness of a fourth SARS-CoV-2 vaccine dose in previously infected individuals from Austria. So it is country specific, which can be a good and a bad thing. You get better control data around certain things. I decided to dive deep into this paper and say, why is this showing such different results than other studies that we're seeing around the world? And I think I found some interesting things that if I were to peer review this paper, I would have asked the authors to address prior to publication. So, that's something that I've done many times in my career, peer review, addressing of, different errors that you might see, or things that were left out, or things that were fully discussed in the context of the data. And I'm going to walk you through some of them. And as I walk you through some of them, I'm just really asking questions because for me, when I see a paper that is so counter to multiple other countries' data, I think you really do have to dig into the question of why. Why are they finding something so different? Is it something novel with the Austrian population? Did they get a different vaccine? How was the data collected? Who was it collected from? What caveats are in place that would make us believe or not believe this data, or request further data to support their points. And this should be done with all scientific research. Make sure the data stands up to scrutiny, and make sure that bias is not being introduced either, which is why we continue to ask questions, especially when we've got a lot of other studies done in different ways, and we find one that's so different. So why? Why is it different? Those studies have all gone through equal, if not more, scrutiny. They come from all different places around the world. What's going on in Austria? Let's dig into this paper. The primary claim in this paper, the one that John Campbell has been talking about in his YouTube channel, etc., is that a fourth dose of a vaccine is no more protective from death than a third dose of vaccine. And in fact, in the data, it shows that a fourth dose of vaccine, according to this data set, is no more protective from death than a third dose, than a second dose, one or two doses, and no doses of vaccine. So that seems odd because we have also a lot of information showing that this is true, that vaccination is protective from death. The authors themselves do state that the subgroup analysis of 4 versus 3 vaccine doses was limited. They could not dig into that data any further because there were so few deaths in the groups that had 4 versus 3 vaccines. Note that they said in this study, their population-based review, no one under 40 years old died from SARS-CoV-2. So let's start with table 1. This should be up on your screen now. Baseline characteristics of the entire study population as of November 1st, 2022. Okay, so what I want to show you guys here is the difference in ages of the vaccinated group. So the people who had 4 vaccine doses on average were 63 years old, an average age range of 49 to 75. No one was under 49 in the group that had 4 vaccine doses or more. The oldest was 75 years old. 3 vaccine doses, the group that it's being compared to, their average age was 44 years old, with an age range between 30 and 57. And remember, no one under 40 died in this study. We know that age has a significant impact on immune system function and survivability when it comes to respiratory virus infections. Your lungs are just younger, right? They're a little younger, a little healthier. 1 to 2 doses of vaccine The average age in that population was 32 years old, aged 20 to 47. So the majority of those people did not even fall into a category where anyone died. And then unvaccinated, the average age was 27, ranging from 11 years old to 44 years old. So only about 4 years in that group where someone could have died in the unvaccinated group. Now, I'm going to take you to table 2, and we're going to look at how many people died in each group. We're going to start right there at the top. In the 4 vaccine doses, remember their average age is 63 years old, 31 people died. Unvaccinated, remember their average age is 27, 11 people died. And no one under 40 died. So someone from 44 to 40 in that unvaccinated group, 11 of them had to die. So that was a little interesting to me. But they do a comparison to 3 doses of vaccine, and they say they age and gender adjust this. And I wonder what's going on there, or if we really have enough to get good statistical significance. Remember, they said it was limited because they only had 51 events of death. To actually see any sort of trend? That would be my question, because the confidence intervals range from 0.7 to 2.2 in the 4 vaccine doses, which means that they overlap with 1. 1 is if it's lower than the number 1, you can be confident of the effect. If it's higher, you can be confident of the effect. But when the confidence intervals overlap 1, it could go either way. There's no statistical significance, no confidence in that interval. And that remains true for 1 to 2 doses of vaccine and unvaccinated. Now, if we go down to SARS-CoV-2 infections, not death, 4 vaccine doses clearly had fewer infections. Maybe there's just fewer people, 4 vaccine doses, than 3 vaccine doses, 1 or 2 vaccine doses, and the unvaccinated. There were more infections happening in those groups. But then if you do events per 100,000 person days, I would have rather have the normalized in other ways, but that's fine. You get in the 4 vaccine dose 29.02, so about 29, pretty much on the nose there, events per 100,000 person days. But with 3 vaccine doses, you have 43.89, so just about 44 events per 100,000 person days. So clearly people with 3 vaccine doses are being infected more often. And then if you go to 1 to 2 doses, it's 41.3. Not really much of a difference there with 3 doses. And then unvaccinated, remember though, they're 27 years old on average, oldest ones being 44, youngest ones being around 11 years old. They have a similar infection rate to those who had 4 vaccine doses, who happen to have an average age of 63. So I thought that was very interesting too, right? If you can't get infected, you can't die from COVID. So I think that was a bit interesting to me as well. Right, so 27.98, effectively 28. So we have effectively 29 events per 100,000 vaccine days, person days in the 4 vaccine doses versus 28 in the unvaccinated, which are decades younger on average than the people who had 4 vaccine doses. Then look at this. They do an age and gender adjustment, and this is where I struggle with the math. I would love to see exactly how they were doing this age and gender adjustment, because somehow the unvaccinated, even though they're significantly younger and have healthier, stronger immune systems on average, have a lower risk rate suddenly for getting infected, even though it was only about 1 event per 100,000 person days different than the 4 vaccine doses. But those people who had the 4 vaccine doses were significantly older. So this math isn't really making sense to me, and I would love for the authors to clear that up or post an adjustment to their reference here, their papers, because something about that doesn't sit quite right. And so that would be a flag. That would be something I would ask as a reviewer for the authors to please clarify how they came up with that number. And then there was another potential gap in the data that I would love for the authors to address. So, according to Table 1, they started pulling population based data on October 1st of 2022. Well, the people who got the fourth vaccine, they had a range of days where they could have gotten the fourth vaccine before they started pulling data of an average of 33 days, down to 19 days, all the way out to 69 days. Okay. So a little over 2 months or so there before they could start pulling the data. Well, the bivalent vaccine, was only approved September 1st by the European Union, meaning that their ranges and when they're pulling the data leaves a large open window for when people could have gotten vaccinated with a vaccine that we know was no longer efficacious against the strains and the variants in circulation. That is why it was updated. So this seems to me, given the data sets that they seem to have, a very easy thing for the authors to address. They should have eliminated a time frame where someone could have gotten a vaccine that was no longer efficacious, right? If they were going to look at the prevention of getting ill and death based on the vaccine in question, based on the fourth shot, the bivalent shot. So I think that's probably why they failed to title the paper around the bivalent booster. They just called it a fourth dose of vaccine, but truly that can be very misleading, especially when you have so few numbers of people and you're trying to make some statistical story out of it, but the statistics are all over the place. Why would you not eliminate that variable, right? If you're trying to claim that the vaccine wasn't doing anything, okay, show that it wasn't doing anything against a variant it was updated to match. That's like taking a vaccine from influenza 10 years ago and saying, oops, it did block influenza this year. It's a totally different variant of influenza. Why would we expect that to work? So the authors really could address this by shifting the time frame of their data collection. They could shift it by knowing, these data sets in Europe are very good, knowing who got which vaccine, and simply removing that group from the population and rerunning their statistics to try to give us an accurate picture of what's really going on. A couple other things. So in this article, they say that 80% of the people in Austria were getting a mRNA-based vaccine. So because we're looking at so few death events in these groups, 3 and 4 doses of vaccine had 51 death events total. And we know that vaccines have different rates of efficacy. I think it would have been really important to understand what that 20% looked like. Were there a lot more people getting a less efficacious vaccine in a group that ended up dying? That should be separable. And I'm surprised that with their good statistics and data tracking, they didn't talk about that. There are 11 different SARS-CoV-2 vaccines approved in Austria. All right. And last but not least, we do know that as people age, they tend to accumulate potential comorbidities. If your body is not healthy, you have something called a comorbidity. It does make fighting off viral, bacterial infections, etc., a little tougher. It's harder for you to get better. It's harder to heal. And unfortunately, in this study, they used no control for comorbidities in their age group that was an average age of 63 versus their age groups that were an average age of, what was the 3-dose vaccine here? Let me just pull it up. An average age of 44. So we know that generally 63-year-olds on average tend to have more comorbidities than people in their mid 40s versus the 1 to 2 dose of vaccine where the average age was 32, and certainly versus the unvaccinated, which were an average age of 27 years old. So they did no control for comorbidities in their data. Now, again, given the small number of events, the incredibly weak statistics on this, and the fact that it does not align with data from multiple other studies around the world around the efficacy, I would say that the authors really do need to address these issues if they expect this paper to be taken seriously by anyone in the scientific community. All right, everyone, take care out there. And I hope that walkthrough helped you understand that paper and the caveats I see as a trained scientist in the field for over 2 decades when I read it. All right, see you later.